I cannot believe she came today. After everything. I'm just saying, it's interesting how Brenda's new car appeared right after the bake sale money went missing. I swear to you, I didn't know he was capable of this. You have to believe me.
I spent 40 years building a name people trusted, and it took my daughter-in-law one night to destroy it. By morning, the women who used to hug me at church wouldn't even meet my eyes. My phone was silent, my messages unanswered. And the worst part? The rumors weren't coming from strangers. They were coming from inside my own family. Melissa Carter, my son's wife, had told everyone I was a liar, a fraud, a woman who stole from the very people I had spent my life helping. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Why would she do this to me? And what hurt even more was that my own son believed her. If you've ever been misunderstood or betrayed by someone you trusted, I'd really like to hear your story. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Sometimes sharing a moment together makes the silence a little easier to bear. Before everything fell apart, my life was quiet, in the kind of way people say they envy, but rarely understand. I lived in a small town just outside Columbus, Ohio, one of those places where everyone knew your name, your habits, and whether they admitted it or not, your history. I had spent over 4 decades building mine carefully, brick by brick, through consistency, kindness, and showing up when it mattered most. My name, Brandon Emerson, meant something in that town. Every Wednesday morning, I helped organize the food pantry at St. Mark's Church. I knew exactly which families preferred canned beans over pasta, which elderly couples needed their groceries delivered because they were too proud to ask. On Sundays, I stood at the entrance with a warm smile greeting people as they walked in, remembering birthdays, asking about grandchildren. It wasn't charity to me, it was purpose. People trusted me, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it slowly, over years of quiet work. No one really noticed at the time. I never expected recognition, but I received it anyway. Brandon, we don't know what we'd do without you. You've always been the heart of this community. You remind us what kindness looks like. I used to smile and brush it off, but I won't lie. I carried those words with me. They mattered, not because they fed my ego, but because they reassured me that my life had meant something. And maybe that's where the problem began, because not everyone saw those compliments the same way. My son, Daniel Emerson, had always been my pride. He was the kind of man who worked hard, built his own success, and never forgot where he came from. At least that's what I believed for most of his life. When he married Melissa Carter, I truly thought I had gained a daughter. Melissa was charming in a way that made people feel immediately comfortable. She had a bright smile, a soft voice, and a way of holding eye contact just long enough to make you feel seen. At family gatherings, she laughed at the right moments, complimented my cooking, and insisted on helping with the dishes. Brandon, you've raised an incredible son, she told me once, placing a gentle hand over mine. I hope I can be half the woman you are someday. I remember how those words warmed me. I believed her. In the beginning, everything felt easy. We shared holidays together. Thanksgiving dinners filled with laughter. Christmas mornings with wrapping paper scattered across the living room floor. Melissa would bring homemade desserts, Daniel would carve the turkey, and I would sit there watching my family grow, feeling grateful in a way that's hard to put into words. I thought I had done everything right, but there were moments, small ones, that didn't quite fit. At first I dismissed them, little things, like the way Melissa's smile sometimes faded a second too quickly when someone praised me. or how she would go quiet during conversations where people talked about the food drives I organized, or the scholarships I helped fund through the church. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, not everyone enjoys being the center of attention. Maybe she was just shy. But then there were other moments. Subtle comments, wrapped in politeness. "You're always so busy with the community, Brandon," she said once, her tone light, but her eyes unreadable. "I don't know how you keep up." "Don't you ever get tired of doing so much for everyone?" I laughed it off. "I suppose I don't know how to stop," I replied. "It's just part of who I am." She nodded slowly. "Must be nice," she said. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Now I think I do. Daniel didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Or if he did, he never said anything. He was focused on his work, building his career, trying to balance his marriage and his responsibilities. Whenever Melissa made one of those comments, he would simply smile sometimes, even chuckle. "She's just teasing Mom," he'd say. And I wanted to believe that. I really did, because the alternative, the idea that something deeper was wrong, felt unnecessary, dramatic, almost ungrateful. So I ignored it. I continued living my life the same way I always had. Helping, giving, showing up. But slowly, almost invisibly, something began to shift. Family dinners became less frequent. Melissa started declining invitations. "She's just tired," Daniel would explain. "Work's been stressful." When they did come over, she seemed distant. Polite, but not warm. Present, but not engaged. And there was something else I couldn't quite explain. A feeling I would get when I caught her looking at me. Not admiration, not affection. Something colder, measured, as if she were studying me. I remember one particular evening, sitting at the dining table, the three of us finishing dinner. I was telling a story about a young family we had helped through the food pantry, how the mother had cried when we delivered groceries just before Christmas. Daniel listened with interest, asking questions. But Melissa didn't say anything. She just watched me. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes, they didn't match. There was no warmth there. Only something tight, controlled. When I finished speaking, Daniel smiled. "That is incredible, Mom. You've always been like that." I nodded, feeling a familiar sense of quiet pride. But then Melissa spoke. "Do people ever wonder where all that money really goes?" she asked. The room went still. I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. She shrugged, taking a sip of her drink. "I'm just saying," she continued, her tone casual, almost indifferent. "Sometimes when someone's too perfect, people start asking questions." Daniel frowned slightly. "Melissa." "What I'm just saying," she continued, her tone casual, almost indifferent. "Sometimes when someone's too perfect, people start asking questions." Daniel frowned slightly. "Melissa." What she said quickly, offering a small laugh. "It's just a thought." "I didn't mean anything by it." I forced a smile. "Of course," I said. "It's always good to ask questions." But inside, something shifted. It was the first time I felt it clearly. Not confusion, not misunderstanding, but something else entirely. A crack. Small, but real. And though I didn't know it then, that moment would come back to me again and again, like a warning I chose not to hear. Because not long after that night, the questions she casually planted would no longer be whispers at my own table. They would become accusations spoken out loud. And by then, it would already be too late. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People go through phases, I thought. Adjustments, marriage changes, dynamics. It was natural for Daniel to prioritize his wife. I had raised him to be loyal, to be supportive. So when I noticed the subtle shifts in his behavior, I tried to accept them with grace. But there's a difference between change and distance. And what began as small differences slowly turned into something I could no longer ignore. It started with conversations. Daniel used to call me every other day sometimes just to check in, sometimes to ask for advice, sometimes for no reason at all. Those calls became shorter, less frequent. Eventually, they became something I had to initiate. "Hey, sweetheart," I would say, trying to sound light. "Just wanted to hear your voice." "Yeah, Mom. I've just been really busy," he would reply. "Work's been crazy." I believed him at first. But then I noticed something else. Whenever I called, Melissa was always nearby. I could hear her voice in the background, soft but present. And sometimes Daniel would lower his voice slightly when he spoke to me, as if he didn't want her to hear certain things. That was new and unsettling. The real shift, though, didn't happen over the phone. It happened in person. The next time they came over for dinner, I had prepared everything. Daniel loved roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans cooked the way he used to ask for as a boy. I even baked an apple pie from scratch, just like I did when he was growing up. I wanted things to feel normal again. For a while they did. We sat at the table, the three of us, the soft hum of the evening filling the room. Daniel complimented the food, smiling the way he always had. Melissa nodded politely, offering a brief, "It's good," before returning her attention to her plate. I tried not to read into it, but then the conversation shifted. "I ran into Pastor William this week," I said casually. "We're organizing another winter drive. It looks like we might be able to help more families this year than last." Daniel smiled. "That's great, Mom. You've always been amazing at that." Before I could respond, Melissa spoke. "Do you ever get audited for that?" she asked. Her tone was calm, for that she asked. Her tone was calm, almost curious. But something about the question didn't sit right. "Audited," I repeated, slightly confused. "Well, the church keeps RIDs, of course. Everything's documented, almost curious. But something about the question didn't sit right." "Audited," I repeated, slightly confused. "Well, the church keeps records, of course. Everything's documented." She tilted her head slightly. "I mean, personally," she continued, "since everything goes through you, that's a lot of responsibility." I felt a flicker of discomfort. "It's not just me," I explained. "There's a team, and everything is transparent." She gave a small smile. "Of course," she said. "I'm just saying, people talk, you know." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Melissa, come on," he said, his voice a little sharper than usual. "What?" she replied, raising her eyebrows. "I'm just asking a question." The tension lingered for a moment before Daniel changed the subject. But something had already settled into the room, something heavy. Later that evening, after they left, I stood in my kitchen longer than I needed to, staring at the dishes I hadn't yet washed. Her words replayed in my mind. People talk. At the time, I didn't realize how literal that statement was. In the weeks that followed, those small moments began to multiply. Melissa would make passing remarks, never outright accusations, never anything you could clearly confront, but always just enough to plant doubt. "Must be nice having everyone think you're perfect. I don't know how you manage all that money. I'd be nervous. Sometimes people don't see what's really going on behind the scenes." Each time I tried to brush it off, but each time it stayed with me a little longer. And then Daniel started changing too. One afternoon, I mentioned an upcoming fundraiser, something I had been working on for months. "I was thinking maybe you and Melissa could come," I said. It would mean a lot to me. There was a pause on the other end of the phone. Yeah, I don't know, Mom, Daniel said slowly. Melissa's not really comfortable with all that. All what I asked gently. All the attention he replied. She feels like I don't know, like things aren't always as clear as they seem. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean by that? I asked. Another pause. I'm just saying, he continued, his voice more cautious now. Maybe you should be careful. People can misunderstand things. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My own son repeating her words. I've never given anyone a reason to doubt me, Daniel, I said quietly. I know, he replied quickly. I'm just trying to be realistic. Realistic. The word echoed in my mind long after the call ended. That was when I realized something had changed. Not just between me and Melissa, but between me and my son. And it wasn't just distance anymore. It was doubt. The next family gathering confirmed it. We were at a small get-together hosted by Linda Hayes, someone I had considered one of my closest friends for over 20 years. She had always been warm, welcoming, the kind of person who made you feel at home the moment you walked through the door. But that evening, something was off. When I arrived, the conversations didn't stop, but they shifted, subtly. People smiled, but not the same way. There was hesitation, a kind of careful politeness that hadn't been there before. Linda greeted me, but her hug was brief, her expression strained. Brandon, I'm glad you could make it, she said, but she didn't meet my eyes. Throughout the evening, I noticed the looks, the whispers, the way people seemed to avoid standing too close to me. At one point, I overheard two women speaking in hushed tones near the kitchen. I heard it was thousands. Well, you never really know with people like that. I froze. People like that? Was that how they saw me now? I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a misunderstanding, coincidence. But deep down, I knew. Something was spreading, something I hadn't said, something I hadn't done, and somehow it was already starting to take root. When I got home that night, I sat alone in my living room, the silence pressing in around me. For the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't shake. What if this wasn't random? What if someone was making this happen? And as much as I didn't want to believe it, one name kept surfacing in my thoughts. Melissa. Because those harmless questions she asked, those small, careless comments, they weren't so harmless anymore. They were seeds. And now they were beginning to grow. The first time I realized something was truly wrong, it wasn't because someone said something to my face. It was because they didn't. Silence. I've learned can be louder than accusation. It was a Tuesday morning, nothing unusual on the surface. I arrived early at St. Mark's Church, just like I always did. The sun was barely up, casting that soft golden light across the parking lot. For years, that place had felt like a second home to me. But that morning, it felt different the moment I stepped inside. There were already a few volunteers setting up for the food pantry. Normally, they would greet me with warm smiles, quick hugs, easy conversation. That day, I got nods. Short ones. Polite, but distant. Morning, I said, forcing a smile as I set my bag down. Morning, someone replied without looking up. I paused. Something tightened in my chest, but I pushed it aside. People have off days, I told myself. Maybe they were tired. I walked over to the storage room where we kept inventory lists and donation records. It had always been my responsibility to organize everything to make sure every dollar, every item was accounted for. That responsibility had always been a source of pride. Now I felt something else, a strange kind of awareness, as if I were being watched. I turned around, half expecting to see someone behind me, but the hallway was empty. Still, the feeling lingered. When I returned to the main room, I noticed two women standing near the coffee station, speaking in low voices. As I approached, they stopped. Not paused. Stopped. Their eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. "Everything okay?" I asked lightly. One of them, Carol, gave a quick smile. "Of course," she said. "Just talking." I nodded slowly, but something in her voice didn't match her words. It wasn't long before the first real sign appeared. Around mid-morning, Pastor William asked to speak with me privately. That alone wasn't unusual. We had worked together for years, and there were always things to discuss. But the look on his face, that was new. Concern. Carefully controlled. "Brandon," he began, closing the door behind us. "I wanted to check in with you about something." I sat down, my hands folding instinctively in my lap. "Of course," I said. "What is it?" He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I felt it. The shift. "There have been questions," he said slowly. Questions I repeated. He nodded. "About the funds from the last few drives. Some people are wondering if everything has been properly managed." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not saying I believe it," he added quickly. "But the concerns are being raised, and as the pastor, I have a responsibility to address them." I stared at him. In all the years I had worked there, never once had anyone questioned my integrity. Not once. "Everything is documented," I said, my voice steadier now, though my heart was beginning to race. "Every donation, every expense. You've seen the records yourself." "I know," he said, "and I trust you. But others are starting to talk." There it was again. Talk. The same word Melissa had used. A chill ran through me. "Who?" I asked quietly. Pastor William shook his head. "I don't want to name anyone right now," he said. "I just think it would be best if we reviewed everything together. For transparency." Transparency. The implication hung in the air. I nodded slowly. "Of course," I said. "I have nothing to hide." And I meant that. But as I left his office, something inside me shifted. This wasn't random. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was deliberate. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions, organizing supplies, greeting people, checking lists, but nothing felt the same. Every glance felt heavier, every whisper louder. By the time I got home, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. I set my keys down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. I picked it up, expecting something ordinary. What I saw instead made my stomach drop. It was a Facebook post from an account I didn't recognize, but the content, it was about me. Some people pretend to be saints in public, but behind closed doors, they're taking advantage of the very people they claim to help. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but it didn't need to be. The comments below made it clear. "I've heard things too. Doesn't surprise me. Always seemed too perfect to be real." My hands began to shake. I scrolled further. There were more posts. Different accounts. Same tone. Same accusations. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. A screenshot. A document. It looked like a financial record, numbers, transactions, dates. And at the bottom, my name. Brandon Emerson. But it wasn't real. I knew it instantly. The formatting was wrong. The numbers didn't match any of our actual records. It was fabricated. Carefully. Convincingly. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just gossip. This was a setup. A calculated attempt to destroy me. And suddenly, all those harmless questions Melissa had asked, all those little comments, they made sense. She hadn't been curious. She had been planting doubt, preparing the ground. So when these accusations appeared, people were already ready to believe them. My chest tightened as another realization hit me. If this was happening publicly, then it had already spread privately, through conversations, through whispers, through trust I had spent decades building. And now, it was unraveling faster than I could understand. I stared at my phone, my reflection faintly visible on the screen. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my own eyes, not because I doubted myself, but because I realized something far more terrifying. I was losing control of my own story. And somewhere, someone was writing it for me. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. But deep down, I already knew. This had Melissa written all over it. And if I didn't do something soon, everything I had built, every relationship, every ounce of trust would be gone. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, just like that. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room long after midnight, the glow of my phone the only light in the house, scrolling through post after post that chipped away at everything I thought was unshakable. It wasn't just one accusation anymore. It was a pattern, carefully constructed, repeated, reinforced. The same phrases appeared again and again: unaccounted funds, misused donations, questionable records. Whoever was behind it knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just throwing out random lies. They were building a story, a believable one. And the worst part? People were accepting it, because it fit just enough of a narrative to make sense. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit in silence. If someone was trying to destroy me, I needed to look them in the eye and ask why. So I called Daniel. He answered on the third ring. "Mom," he said, sounding distracted. "Everything okay?" "No," I said plainly. "It's not." There was a pause. "What's going on? I need to talk to you." "In person," I said. "Today." Another pause, longer this time. "I have meetings," he replied. "Can it wait?" "No," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "It can't." Something in my tone must have reached him. "All right," he said finally. "Come by this afternoon." I drove to their house with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. I had been there countless times before. I knew the driveway, the front door, the way the porch creaked slightly under my weight. But that day, it didn't feel like a place I belonged. Melissa answered the door. She looked exactly the same as always, calm, composed, perfectly put together. "Brandon," she said, offering a small smile. "This is a surprise." Her voice was warm. Too warm. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. She stepped aside. "Of course." "Brandon," she said, offering a small smile. "This is a surprise." Her voice was warm. Too warm. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. She stepped aside. Of course. Daniel was in the living room, his laptop open, papers scattered across the coffee table. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to concern. "What's going on?" he asked. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, holding it up. "Have you seen this?" I asked. He frowned, taking the phone from my hand. As he scrolled, his expression tightened. "What is this?" he muttered. "Exactly," I said. "That's what I want to know." Melissa stepped closer, glancing at the screen. "Oh," she said softly. "I heard something about that." I turned to her. "You heard about it," I repeated. She nodded. "People have been talking," she said. I didn't want to upset you. A sharp edge crept into my voice. You didn't want to upset me, I said. Melissa, these posts are accusing me of stealing, of lying, of everything I've spent my life trying not to be. Daniel looked between us. Wait, he said. Are these real? I mean, are they based on something? The question hit me like a slap. You can't be serious, I said. I'm just asking, he replied, his tone defensive now. I need to understand what's going on. Hey, what's going on? I said slowly. Is that someone is spreading lies about me, and I want to know why. My eyes stayed on Melissa. She met my gaze without flinching. I don't know, she said calmly. But I think it's important to consider that when multiple people are saying the same thing, there might be a reason. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Are you saying you believe this? I asked Daniel. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I had my answer. I don't know what to believe, he said finally. That's the problem. Something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The kind of break that doesn't show on the outside, but changes everything on the inside. I've never given you a reason to doubt me, I said, my voice trembling now, despite my effort to stay composed. I know, he said quickly. But things don't just come out of nowhere, Mom. There has to be something behind this. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. There doesn't. Melissa crossed her arms lightly, her expression thoughtful. Maybe not intentionally, she added. But sometimes people don't realize how their actions are perceived, especially when they're in positions of trust. Her words were carefully chosen, measured, designed to sound reasonable. But I could hear what she wasn't saying, and suddenly, everything became clear. You started this, I said. The room went still. Melissa blinked just once. Sorry, she said. You started this. I repeated, my voice steadier now. The questions, the comments, the doubts. You planted them. Daniel looked at me shocked. Mom? No, I said, raising a hand. Let me finish. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. You asked about audits, about money, about people talking. You said those things in front of others. You made it sound like there was something to question. Her expression hardened slightly. That's not fair, she said. Isn't it? I replied. Because now those exact same questions are everywhere. Online, in the community, in my own church. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. This is getting out of hand, he said. Melissa wouldn't do that. I turned to him. How do you know? I asked. He didn't answer. Melissa stepped forward, her voice calm, but colder now. I think you're upset, she said, and you're looking for someone to blame. I let out a bitter laugh. No, I said. I'm finally seeing what's been right in front of me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And what exactly is that? She asked. That you don't respect me, I said. That you never did, and that you've been trying to tear me down piece by piece ever since you realized you couldn't replace me. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Daniel stared at me. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Melissa didn't respond immediately. Instead, she smiled, a small, controlled smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're making assumptions, she said quietly. Dangerous ones. And you're hiding behind innocence, I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel exhaled sharply. "This isn't helping," he said. "We need facts, not accusations." I looked at him, really looked at him. My son, the boy I had raised, the man who now stood in front of me, unsure of who I was. "You want facts," I said softly. "Yes," he replied. "Then here's one," I said. "Everything they're saying about me is a lie." Silence filled the room. "And here's another," I continued. "I'm going to prove it." Melissa's smile didn't fade. "If you can," she said. I held her gaze. "I will," I replied, and for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't speaking from fear. I was speaking from certainty, because whatever game she was playing, she had just made one mistake. She underestimated me. The moment I walked out of Daniel's house, I understood something I hadn't been ready to admit before. I was alone. Not in the physical sense. There were still people around me, still voices, still movement in the world, but in the way that mattered most. No one was standing beside me anymore, not even my own son. I drove home slowly, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The road was familiar, but everything felt different, like I was seeing my own life from a distance I couldn't cross. By the time I reached my house, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. Not the kind sleep could fix. The kind that comes from realizing something has been taken from you and you don't know how to get it back. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment, as silence filled the space. This house had always been my refuge. Now it felt like a place I had been sent to hide. I set my bag down and walked into the kitchen, instinctively reaching for the folder where I kept all my records, donations, receipts, transaction logs, everything meticulously organized over the years. If they wanted proof, I would give it to them. If they wanted transparency, I would show them everything. I spread the documents across the table, flipping through pages, checking dates, verifying numbers. Every entry was exactly where it should be. Every dollar accounted for. I hadn't done anything wrong. I knew that, but knowing it and proving it to people who had already decided otherwise, those were two very different things. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another post. Another comment. I didn't want to look, but I did. They're saying the church is investigating now. About time someone looked into her. I always had a feeling something wasn't right. I felt something twist inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something deeper. Something closer to grief. Because these weren't strangers. These were people I had helped. People whose hands I had held. People who had once trusted me without question. And now they were turning on me. Just like that. I set the phone down, but the words stayed with me. Louder than before. Heavier. And then the call came. It was from Linda Hayes. For a moment, I hesitated before answering. Linda had been my friend for over 20 years. We had shared holidays, supported each other through losses, celebrated milestones together. If anyone would understand, it was her. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi." There was a pause on the other end. "Brandon?" she replied. I wanted to check in." Relief flickered through me. "Thank you," I said. "I've been meaning to call you." Another pause. Longer this time. "I've been hearing things," she said carefully. The words landed like a weight. "I know," I replied. "That's why I need to talk to you. None of it is true. You know me, Linda. You know who I am." Silence. "I want to believe that," she said softly. My grip tightened around the phone. "Want to believe," I repeated. "Linda, you've known me for decades." "I know," she said quickly. "But there are documents, Brandon. People have seen things. It's not just rumors anymore. They're fake, I said, my voice rising despite myself. All of it is fabricated. Someone is doing this deliberately. Who would do that? She asked. I closed my eyes. I could feel the answer sitting on the edge of my tongue, but saying it out loud would make it real. I think Melissa is behind it, I said finally. There it was, out in the open. Linda didn't respond immediately. When she did, her tone had changed. That's a serious accusation, she said. I know, I replied. But think about it. The questions that she's been asking. The things she's been saying. This didn't come out of nowhere. Brandon? She began, her voice gentler now, but distant. You're under a lot of stress. Maybe you're connecting things that aren't actually related. My heart sank. No, I said. I'm seeing things clearly for the first time. I just don't think it's fair to blame her without proof, Linda said. Proof. That word again. As if my entire life, my heart sank. No, I said. I'm seeing things clearly for the first time. I just don't think it's fair to blame her without proof, Linda said. Proof. That word again. As if my entire life, everything I had built meant nothing without it. I'll get proof, I said quietly. I hope you do, she replied, because right now people are worried. Worried, not about me, about what I might have done. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice barely audible now. I know you believe that, she said. The line went quiet for a moment. Then she added, I just think it might be best if you step back for a while. Let things settle. Step back. Disappear. Give the rumors room to breathe. No, I said more firmly this time. I'm not going anywhere. Another pause. All right, she said finally. Just be careful. The call ended, and just like that, another piece of my world slipped away. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand, the silence louder than anything she had said. Even Linda. Even she didn't believe me. I walked back to the kitchen table, staring at the papers spread out before me. Evidence of a life lived honestly. And yet it wasn't enough. Because lies. Lies don't need proof to spread. They just need people willing to believe them. I sank into a chair, my shoulders heavy, my mind racing. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind, what if I couldn't fix this? What if everything I had built was already gone? But then something else followed. Quieter, stronger, more certain. No. I wasn't done yet. They wanted proof I would find it. Not just enough to defend myself, enough to expose the truth. Because if Melissa thought she could tear me down and walk away untouched, then she didn't know me at all. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for someone to believe me. I was going to make them see it. The silence in my house that night felt different. Not empty. Not peaceful, but heavy, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun had gone down, the papers still spread in front of me untouched now. My eyes had stopped seeing numbers. My mind had stopped trying to make sense of things that clearly weren't meant to make sense. I had reached a point I never thought I would. I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt erased. 40 years of trust reduced to whispers. And the worst part wasn't that people were talking. It was that they had stopped listening. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally, I reached for it almost reluctantly, as if I already knew whatever waited on the other side wouldn't bring anything good. But this time, It wasn't a comment. It was a message. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a moment before opening it. I know what she's doing, and I know how she's doing it. My heart skipped. For a second, I wondered if it was some kind of cruel joke, but something about the message, it didn't feel like one. My fingers hesitated over the screen before I typed back. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Someone who's been watching longer than you think." A chill ran through me. "Watching what?" I asked. Melissa, the name sat there heavy and undeniable. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse quickening. "Explain?" I typed. There was a pause this time, long enough to make me question whether I had imagined the whole thing. "Then she's been setting you up for months." My breath caught. Months. Not days, not weeks, months. I stared at the message, my mind racing back through every conversation, every comment, every moment I had dismissed. The small questions, the subtle doubts, the careful observations. None of it had been random. "Who are you?" I typed again. This time the answer came slower. "Mark Reynolds." The name was familiar. It took me a moment to place it. Mark. My old neighbor. He had moved a few streets over years ago, and while we were never particularly close, we had always been friendly. The kind of neighbor who waved, who helped carry groceries, who showed up when something needed fixing. But not someone I would expect this from. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because what she's doing isn't right." Simple. Direct. And somehow, that made it more believable. I hesitated before typing my next message. "What do you know?" The reply came in pieces, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I've seen her on her phone, multiple accounts, posting things." Replying to herself? My grip tightened around the phone. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes." Another message followed. "And I saw her once at the cafe on Maple Street showing someone documents, saying she had proof about you." Proof. The same fake evidence I had seen online? "She's controlling you," I had seen online. "She's controlling the narrative," Mark added, making it look like it's coming from different people. My heart pounded. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. Or at least the beginning of it. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" I asked. There was a longer pause this time. "I wasn't sure," he replied. "And honestly, I didn't want to get involved, but it's gone too far now." I closed my eyes for a moment. Too far. Yes, it had gone too far. "Can you prove it?" I asked. That question hung in the air longer than any before it. When his response finally came, it was cautious. "Not yet," he said, "but I can try." Try. It wasn't certainty, but it was something, and right now, something was more than I had. "Will you help me?" I asked. There was no hesitation this time. "Yes." The words settled into me in a way I hadn't expected. Not relief, not quite, but support. The first real sign of it since this nightmare had begun. I set the phone down slowly, my mind spinning. For the first time in days, the fog began to lift just enough for me to see a path forward. It wasn't clear, it wasn't easy, but it was there. Melissa wasn't just spreading rumors. She was orchestrating them, carefully, deliberately, and if that was true, then there had to be a way to expose it. I stood up from the table, my legs unsteady at first, as if my body wasn't used to carrying something other than defeat. But this wasn't defeat anymore. This was something else, something sharper, something stronger, determination. I walked to the window and looked out into the dark street. Everything looked the same as it always had. Quiet. Still. But I knew better now. Things weren't what they seemed. They hadn't been for a long time. Behind the calm surface, there were plans, moves, intentions, and for too long, I had been the only one not playing. That was about to change, because now I wasn't just defending myself. I was uncovering the truth. And the truth has a way of rising, no matter how deeply someone tries to bury it. I picked up my phone again, staring at Mark's last message. Yes, a single word, but it changed everything. Because for the first time since this began, I wasn't completely alone, and Melissa, she had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I didn't wake up with fear. I woke up with a plan. For days, I had been reacting, absorbing, defending, trying to make sense of something designed to confuse me. But now, for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't chasing the damage. I was going to expose the cause. Mark and I agreed to meet that afternoon at a small diner just outside town. It wasn't a place Melissa frequented, which made it safer. Or, at least it felt that way. When I walked in, I spotted him immediately. He looked different than I remembered, older, quieter, like someone who had seen more than he talked about. He gave me a small nod as I approached, his expression serious. "Brandon?" he said. "Mark," I replied, sitting across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward slightly. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I didn't have much of a choice," I answered honestly. He nodded. "I figured." A waitress came by, but neither of us ordered anything beyond coffee. This wasn't a social meeting. It was something else entirely. "So," I said, keeping my voice low, "tell me everything." Mark exhaled slowly as if preparing himself. "I started noticing things a while ago," he said. "At first it didn't mean much, just odd behavior, like what I asked. She was always on her phone," he explained, "but not like most people. It wasn't casual scrolling. It was deliberate, focused." I listened carefully. "Posting?" I asked. He nodded, and switching accounts, he added. "More than one." I saw her log out and back in multiple times in the same sitting. A chill crept up my spine. "That alone doesn't prove anything," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I didn't say anything at first." He paused, then continued. "But then I overheard her talking. To who?" I asked. "I couldn't see the person clearly," he said. "They were sitting across from her at the cafe, but I heard enough." My heart began to pound. What did she say? Mark hesitated, then looked directly at me. She said, "It's working. People are already starting to question her. Once the documents circulate, it'll be over." The words hit me like a cold wave. Over. She had said it like a plan, like an ending she had already decided. I swallowed hard. "You're sure?" I asked. "Yes," he said firmly. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." I leaned back slightly, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was intent. Clear. Calculated. "And the documents?" I asked. "I think she created them," he said, "or had someone help her. They looked real enough to fool people who didn't know what to look for." I thought about the screenshot I had seen, the formatting, the numbers that didn't match. "They're fake," I said quietly. "I believe you," he replied. That simple sentence meant more than anything I had heard in days. I looked at him. Can you prove what you saw? I asked. He hesitated. Not directly, he admitted. But I might be able to get something. How I pressed. She's careless sometimes, he said, confident. That makes people sloppy. I nodded slowly. Confidence. Yes, that sounded like Melissa. She thinks she's already won, I said. Mark gave a small, grim smile. That's usually when people make mistakes. The idea settled into my mind. If she believed the damage was done, she wouldn't be as careful anymore. Then we need to catch her in one, I said. Mark leaned forward again. I was thinking the same thing. We spent the next hour going over possibilities. Carefully, strategically. This wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about evidence. Real, undeniable proof that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. Because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Truth alone wasn't enough. Not in a world where lies spread faster. Truth needed to be seen, documented, exposed. What about the accounts? I asked. The ones she's using. I've tried tracking them, Mark said, but they're scattered. Different names, different profiles. Can they be traced? I asked. Maybe, he said, but it would take time, and we don't have much of that. He was right. Every day this continued, the damage grew. Then we focus on what we can prove quickly. Maybe, he said, but it would take time, and we don't have much of that. He was right. Every day this continued, the damage grew. Then we focus on what we can prove quickly, I said. Mark nodded. The calf, he said. She goes there often. Same time, same table. I felt something click into place. Routine, predictable behavior. That was something we could use. When I asked, late mornings, he replied. Around 11. I checked the time. It was already past noon. Tomorrow, I said. Mark held my gaze. Are you ready for that? He asked. The question lingered for a moment. Was I ready to see it for myself? To confirm beyond any doubt that the person I had welcomed into my family had orchestrated my downfall. I thought about Daniel, about the way he hesitated, about the doubt in his voice, about the distance, and I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, stronger. Resolve. Yes, I said. Mark nodded. Then tomorrow, he repeated. We stood up from the table, the conversation between us unfinished, but understood. As I walked out of the diner, the air felt different, clearer, sharper. For days I had been drowning in confusion. Now I had direction. Melissa had built her story carefully, piece by piece, lie by lie. But she had made one critical mistake. She believed no one was paying attention. Tomorrow, that would change. And for the first time since everything began, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was ready for it. Because whatever the truth was, it was finally within reach. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, because I didn't want to miss a single detail. The place looked ordinary. Sunlight pouring through wide windows, the soft hum of conversation, the smell of fresh coffee in the air. It was the kind of place people went to feel comfortable, to relax, to talk freely. And that was exactly why Melissa chose it. I spotted Mark sitting in the far corner, already positioned, where he could see the entrance clearly without drawing attention. He gave me a subtle nod as I approached, then glanced down at his coffee like any other customer. We didn't sit together. That had been part of the plan. I took a table 2 rows behind him, angled just enough to see what he saw. Then we waited. Every minute stretched longer than it should have. I watched the door open and close, people coming and going, each one making my heart jump just a little before settling again. Until finally, she walked in. Melissa. She looked exactly the same as always. Calm, composed, confident. She wore a soft beige coat, her hair neatly styled, her expression relaxed in a way that made it seem like she had nothing to worry about, like she had already won. She didn't look around nervously. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the same table Mark had described, the one near the window. Routine, predictable, exactly as we hoped. I forced myself to stay still, lowering my gaze slightly as she passed, making sure she didn't recognize me. She didn't. To her, I wasn't a threat. Not anymore. She sat down, pulled out her phone, and within seconds, her entire focus shifted. I watched carefully. Mark hadn't been exaggerating. This wasn't casual scrolling. Her movements were precise, intentional. She tapped, paused, switched screens, logged out, logged back in. Different accounts, just like he said. My pulse quickened. This was it. Not proof yet, but confirmation. A few minutes later, someone joined her. A man, mid-40s, well-dressed, carrying a laptop bag. He sat across from her, leaning in slightly as they began to talk. I couldn't hear everything from where I was sitting, but I didn't need to. Their body language said enough. Melissa was in control of the conversation. Confident, measured. At one point, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. My stomach tightened. Documents. She slid them across the table toward him. He opened them, scanning the pages, his expression shifting from curiosity to interest. Then Melissa leaned forward, and though I couldn't hear every word, I caught enough. Numbers line up, looks legitimate. People already believe it. Once it spreads further, my hands clenched under the table. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was real. She was doing exactly what Mark said. Manufacturing evidence, controlling the narrative. I glanced toward Mark. He had already positioned his phone carefully on the table, angled just enough to capture everything without being obvious. Recording. Smart. Careful. Exactly what we needed. I turned my attention back to Melissa. She smiled slightly as she spoke, her expression calm, almost satisfied. "It won't take much longer," she said. That part I heard clearly. The man nodded. "And you're sure she won't fight back?" he asked. Melissa let out a small, quiet laugh. "She won't know how it won't take much longer," she said. That part I heard clearly. The man nodded. "And you're sure she won't fight back?" he asked. Melissa let out a small, quiet laugh. "She won't know how," she replied. "She still thinks people trust her." Something inside me burned, not loudly, not explosively, but steadily, like a fire that had been waiting for oxygen, because in that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't just jealousy. This wasn't insecurity. This was something deeper, something colder. Melissa didn't just want to replace me. She wanted to erase me, to take everything I had built and make it hers. The respect, the trust, the position in the community. And the only way to do that was to destroy my reputation first. I watched as the man handed the documents back to her. "Looks solid," he said. "If anyone checks, it'll pass a surface glance." Surface glance, that's all it took. Because most people don't dig deeper. They believe what looks real. Melissa nodded. "Good," she said. "That's all I need." She slipped the papers back into her bag, her movements calm, controlled. Like this was just another task on her list. Another step in a plan that was already unfolding exactly the way she wanted. I felt something shift inside me again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Because now, I wasn't guessing. I wasn't assuming. I was seeing it with my own eyes. And so was Mark. A few minutes later, the man stood up, shook her hand, and left. Melissa stayed behind, finishing her coffee as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just orchestrated someone else's downfall, as if she hadn't just confirmed everything I feared. I waited, carefully, patiently, until she stood up to leave. She walked past my table without even a glance, still confident, still unaware, still believing she was untouchable. The moment she stepped outside, I stood up and walked toward Mark. We didn't speak until we were out of the cafe. Not a word, not a glance. Only once we reached the parking lot did he finally turn to me. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I replied. "I heard it." He nodded slowly. "And I got most of it on video," he added. Video. The word landed differently. He reached into his pocket and showed me his phone. A short clip played on the screen. Melissa, the documents, the conversation. Not everything was perfectly clear, but enough. More than enough. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Control. Because now we had something real. Not rumors, not assumptions. Evidence. I looked at Mark, my voice steady. "This is just the beginning," I said. He gave a small nod. "I know." I glanced back toward the cafe where Melissa had just walked out moments before. She thought she was ahead. She thought she had already won. But she didn't realize something had changed. The story she created was no longer hers to control. And very soon, everyone was going to see the truth. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car, in the cafe parking lot, the engine off my hands resting in my lap, staring straight ahead. For days, I had been trying to hold everything together, trying to stay calm, trying to believe that things would somehow resolve themselves. But now, there was no more illusion. Melissa wasn't just involved. She was the architect, and somehow that truth didn't break me the way I thought it would. It steadied me, because now I finally knew what I was fighting. My phone buzzed, a message from Mark. "Backup copies saved. We need more." I stared at the screen for a moment. He was right. What we had, it was strong, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Melissa was careful, calculated. If we were going to expose her completely, we needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away as misunderstanding or taken out of context. We needed her own words, clear, direct, unavoidable. I typed back, "I have an idea." His reply came almost instantly. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath before responding. "She thinks I'm weak, that I don't know what she's doing. That's obvious," he replied. "Good," I typed. "Then we use that." There was a pause. Then, "You're going to confront her?" "Yes." Another pause. "That's risky." "I know," I replied, "but it's the fastest way to get the truth." And deep down, I knew something else. Melissa liked control. She liked being one step ahead. And people like that? They talk when they feel safe, when they think they've already won. If I approached her the right way, she might just give me exactly what I needed. "Let's do it," Mark finally replied. I sat back, exhaling slowly. This was it. No more waiting, no more guessing. The next day, I called Danny Moore guessing. The next day, I called Danny L. He sounded surprised to hear from me. Mom, I need to come by again, I said. A pause. About what? Everything, I replied. Another pause. Melissa's here, he said. Good, I said. That's exactly who I need to talk to. L. He sounded surprised to hear from me. Mom, I need to come by again, I said. A pause. About what? Everything, I replied. Another pause. Melissa's here, he said. Good, I said. That's exactly who I need to talk to. There was hesitation in his voice when he finally answered. All right. I hung up before I could second-guess myself. By the time I arrived at their house, I felt something I hadn't felt since this all began. Calm. Not the fragile kind. The kind that comes when you've already decided what you're going to do. Melissa opened the door again. Same smile, same composed expression. But this time, I saw through it. Brandon, she said softly. Back so soon, I replied, stepping inside. I'm not going anywhere. Daniel was already in the living room, his posture tense, his eyes moving between the two of us. Can we just talk calmly this time? He said. I nodded. That's exactly what I want. Melissa gestured toward the couch. Please, she said. We sat down. The same positions as before, but everything had changed. I didn't waste time. I know what you've been doing, I said. Melissa tilted her head slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I held her gaze. The accounts, I continued. The posts, the fake documents. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Melissa. She didn't react immediately, didn't panic, didn't deny. She simply looked at me carefully. You're making serious accusations again, she said. Am I? I replied calmly. Yes, she said, and without proof. There it was again. Proof. I leaned forward slightly. You met with someone yesterday at the cafe on Maple Street, I said. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Small, but real. Daniel looked confused. What cafe? He asked. Melissa recovered quickly. I meet people all the time, she said. That doesn't mean anything. You showed him documents, I continued. Daniel's confusion turned into concern. What documents? Melissa's expression hardened slightly. I think you're imagining things, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I heard you. Silence, heavy, pressing. Then, she smiled. Not the polite smile from before. Not the careful one. Something else. Colder. You heard me? She repeated softly. Yes. Another pause. Then she leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. And what exactly do you think you heard? Not the polite smile from before. Not the careful one. Something else. Colder. You heard me, she repeated softly. Yes. Another pause. Then she leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. And what exactly do you think you heard? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch. Because I could feel it now. The shift. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was measuring me. Testing how much I really knew. And that was exactly where I wanted her. I think you said it's working, I replied slowly. That people are starting to question me. Daniel looked between us again. Melissa? She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me. And if I did, she asked quietly. The room went still. Even Daniel seemed to freeze. I leaned forward slightly. Then I think you've been planning this for a long time, I said. Another pause. Longer. Then she exhaled softly, and something in her posture changed. Relaxed. Almost relieved. Like she didn't have to pretend anymore. You're smarter than I thought, she said. Daniel's face went pale. What? He whispered. Melissa turned her head slightly, finally looking at him. I told you she wasn't as simple as she seems, she said. My heart pounded, not from fear, from realization. She was slipping, talking, exactly like I hoped. Why, I asked. She looked back at me. Because someone had to, she said simply. The answer stunned me. Had to, what I asked. Level things out, she replied. You had too much influence, too much control. People trusted you blindly. That's not a crime, I said. No, she agreed. But it's dangerous. Level things out, she replied. You had too much influence, too much control. People trusted you blindly. That's not a crime, I said. You blindly. That's not a crime, I said. No, she agreed. But it's dangerous. Daniel shook his head, his voice shaking. Melissa, what are you saying? She didn't answer him. She kept looking at me. I didn't lie completely, she continued. No, she agreed. But it's dangerous. Daniel shook his head, his voice shaking. Melissa, what are you saying? She didn't answer him. She kept looking at me. I didn't lie completely, she continued. I just helped people see what they were already willing to believe. My chest tightened. You created fake documents, I said. She gave a small shrug. Details, she replied. Daniel stood up abruptly. This isn't real, he said. Tell me this isn't real. Melissa sighed. I did what I had to do, she said, for what he demanded. She looked at him now. Because someone needed to take your place, she said. Silence exploded through the room. And in that moment, everything changed. Because this wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't theory. This was confession. Clear, unfiltered, irreversible. And she had no idea that every word she just said was being recorded. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the room felt thick, like it had been sealed off from the rest of the world. Daniel was still standing, his face pale, his eyes locked on Melissa, as if he were trying to recognize someone he no longer knew. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because Melissa had already said enough. Too much. But she didn't seem to realize that, or maybe she didn't care anymore. You don't understand, she said calmly, looking at Daniel. This was necessary. Necessary? His voice cracked. To destroy my mother? Melissa sighed, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. I didn't destroy her, she replied. I exposed weakness. My hands tightened slightly in my lap. Weakness? That's what she thought I was. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, this doesn't make sense, he said. You said those things weren't true. Melissa looked at him with something almost like pity. Truth is flexible, she said. People don't respond to facts. They respond to perception. Her words sent a cold wave through me. Because she wasn't wrong. That's exactly what had been happening. And you manipulated that, I said quietly. She turned back to me. Yes, she said. No hesitation, no denial, just truth twisted but honest. Daniel let out a sharp breath, pacing a few steps before turning back to her. So, all of this, the posts, the accusations, the documents, I created the momentum, she said. The rest happened on its own. I felt something shift inside me again. Not anger. Something heavier. Disappointment. Because this wasn't just about what she did. It was about how easily people believed it. How long, I asked. Melissa tilted her head slightly. Long enough, she replied. Months, I pressed. A faint smile appeared. You're catching on. Daniel stopped pacing. You've been planning this for months, he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Melissa didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, You know how people are. They trust what's familiar. So you have to change what feels familiar. And that meant turning them against me. I said, It meant giving them a reason to question you. She corrected. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. It meant lying. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Because in her mind, it wasn't lying. It was strategy. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, his breathing uneven. I don't understand, he said. Why would you do this? What did you gain from it? Melissa looked at him carefully. For us, she said. Daniel blinked. For us. Yes, she replied. You were always in her shadow. People didn't come to you. They went to her. They respected her more, trusted her more. That's not, he started. It is, she interrupted. And you know it. Silence. Because deep down, he did know it. And so did I. But that had never been something I held over him. It had never been competition. Until now. So you decided to fix that? Daniel asked, his voice quieter now. Melissa nodded. Yes. By destroying her reputation, he pressed. By creating space for you, she replied. The words landed like a blow. Because they weren't just about me anymore. They were about him. About his place in the world. And the way she had twisted it. Daniel shook his head again, but this time slower. No, he said. That's not how this works. Melissa's expression didn't change. It is now, she said. I watched them, feeling like I was standing at the edge of something breaking. Not just trust, not just family. Something deeper. Something that couldn't be put back together the same way. Daniel, I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Guilt. I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear I didn't know. I nodded. I believe you, I said. And I did. Because whatever Melissa had done, she had done it alone, carefully, quietly. But that didn't erase what had happened. The doubt, the hesitation, the distance. Melissa stood up slowly. I think this conversation is over, she said. No, I replied, standing as well. It's just beginning. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. What more do you want? She asked. I held her gaze. The truth, I said. She let out a small laugh. You already have it. Yes, I replied. And so will everyone else. For the first time, her confidence faltered. Just slightly. What do you mean? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Then I pressed play. The room filled with her own voice. It's working. People are already starting to question her. Once the documents circulate, she won't know how. Every word. Clear. Undeniable. Irrefutable. Melissa froze. Daniel stared at the phone, his face draining of color. And I watched her, carefully. Because this was the moment everything shifted. You recorded me? She said quietly. Yes, I replied. Her eyes flicked toward Daniel, then back to me. That's illegal, she said. I shook my head. No, I said. What's illegal is what you've been doing. Silence, heavy, final. For the first time since this began, she had no control. No narrative, no angle, just the truth. And the truth was louder than anything she had created. Daniel sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. Oh my God, he whispered. Melissa didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even try to defend herself. Because she knew. Just like I did. It was over. Not quietly, not gradually, but all at once. Just like she planned for me. Only this time, she was the one standing in the middle of it. No one spoke for a long time. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything that needed to be said already had been. Daniel sat motionless, his face buried in his hands, as if he were trying to block out the reality that had just shattered in front of him. Melissa stood across from me, her posture still composed, but not the same. Not confident anymore, not untouchable. For the first time since I had known her, she looked cornered, and she knew it. You should delete that, she said finally, her voice low but controlled. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. No, I replied calmly. I won't. Her jaw tightened slightly. You don't understand what you're doing, she said. I took a slow step forward. No, I said. I think for the first time I understand exactly what I'm doing. Daniel lifted his head, his voice hoarse. Mom, he said. What happens now? I looked at him, really looked at him. Not as the son who doubted me, but as the man who had just seen the truth. That depends, I said quietly. On how far this has gone. Melissa let out a small breath, almost like a laugh. It's already gone far enough, she said. I turned to her. Yes, I agreed. It has. Another silence fell between us. But this one felt different. Final. Because the balance had shifted. For days, she had controlled the story. Now, I did. What did you think would happen? I asked her. She met my gaze. That you would step aside, she said. That things would settle. That people would move on. And me? I asked. She shrugged slightly. You would fade, she said. Fade, like I had never mattered, like everything I had built could simply disappear. I nodded slowly. That's what you don't understand, I said. Her eyes narrowed. And what's that I'm not something you can erase? I replied. The words hung in the air. Not loud, not dramatic, but solid, unshakable. Daniel stood up slowly, his movements uncertain, like he was still trying to find his balance in a world that had just shifted beneath him. You lied to me, he said, looking at Melissa. She didn't deny it. I did what was necessary, she repeated. No, he said firmly. You did what you wanted. balance in a world that had just shifted beneath him. "You lied to me," he said, looking at Melissa. She didn't deny it. "I did what was necessary," she repeated. "No," he said firmly. "You did what you wanted." That landed differently, because for the first time he wasn't defending her. He was seeing her, clearly. Melissa's expression hardened. "You don't understand the bigger picture," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No," he replied. "I understand enough." He turned to me, his eyes filled with something deeper than guilt now. "Regret. I should have trusted you," he said. I felt a quiet ache in my chest. "I wish you had," I replied. The truth didn't need to be softened. Not anymore. Because this wasn't just about what Melissa had done. It was about what doubt had cost us. He nodded slowly, absorbing that. Then he looked back at Melissa. "This is over," he said. She didn't react immediately. Then she let out a small, controlled breath. "You think this ends because of one recording?" she asked. I stepped forward again. "It doesn't end because of the recording," I said. Then why she challenged? "Because the truth doesn't stop with this," I replied. I lifted my phone slightly. "This is just the beginning." Her eyes flickered. There it was again. That small crack in her control. "What are you planning?" she asked. I held her gaze. "I'm going to show people what you did," I said. "Not just this. Everything." Daniel looked between us. "How?" he asked. I turned to him. "The same way she did," I said. "But with the truth." Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. "People won't care," she said. "They've already made up their minds." I shook my head. "No," I said. "They've only heard one side." "And you think they'll suddenly believe you?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. Her brow lifted slightly. Why I didn't hesitate. "Because I won't be asking them to trust me," I said. "I'll be showing them the truth." Silence. Then she laughed. But this time it didn't sound confident. It sounded forced. "Good luck," she said. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need luck anymore. I had something stronger. Evidence. Daniel stepped closer to me. "What do you need?" he asked. I looked at him surprised. "Your support?" I said honestly. He nodded without hesitation. "You have it." That simple sentence meant more than anything else in that moment. Because for the first time since this began, I wasn't standing alone. Melissa watched us, her expression unreadable. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. I turned to her one last time. "No," I said. "You did." And with that, something inside me settled. Not victory, not yet, but certainty. Because the path ahead was clear now. Not easy, not quick, but clear. I walked toward the door, Daniel following behind me. For a moment, I paused. Then I looked back. Melissa was still standing there, still composed, but no longer in control. "You tried to destroy my reputation," I said. She didn't answer. "But you forgot something," I continued. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" I held her gaze. "Reputation isn't just what people say about you," I said. "It's what survives when the truth comes out." Silence. Then I turned and walked out. This time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was stepping forward. Because for the first time since all of this began, the truth wasn't buried anymore. It was rising, And very soon, this time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was stepping forward, because for the first time since all of this began, the truth wasn't buried anymore. It was rising. And very soon, everyone was going to see it. The first place I went was not the church. It wasn't the community center, and it certainly wasn't social media. I went home because I needed one thing before anything else: clarity. I sat at my kitchen table again, the same place where everything had first started to fall apart. But this time, the feeling was different. Before, I had been overwhelmed. Now I was focused. The recording sat on my phone, replaying in my mind over and over again. Every word Melissa had spoken, every moment she had slipped. It wasn't just evidence. It was truth, raw, undeniable. And yet I knew something important. Truth alone doesn't fix everything. People don't just change their minds because you show them facts. They change when they feel something, when they realize they were wrong, when they see the impact of that mistake. If I wanted my reputation back, I couldn't just prove Melissa lied. I had to show them what those lies had done. That night, I made 3 calls. The first was to Pastor William. He answered on the second ring. "Brandon?" He said, his voice cautious. "Yes," I replied. "We need to talk." A pause. "Is this about the situation?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and I have something you need to hear." Another pause. "All right," he said. "Come in tomorrow morning." The second call was harder. Linda Hayes. It rang longer this time. When she finally answered, her voice was quieter than usual. "Brandon, I'm not asking you to believe me," I said before she could continue. "I'm asking you to listen." Silence. Then, "All right," she said. The third call was to someone I hadn't expected to call, the community board coordinator, James Holloway. If this was going to be seen, it needed to be seen, public to be seen. It needed to be seen public lie. By everyone. "I want to request a community meeting," I told him. He hesitated. "That's a big step," he said. "I know," I replied, "but this didn't happen privately. IT shouldn't be resolved privately either." "Lie. By everyone. I want to request a community meeting," I told him. He hesitated. "That's a big step," he said. "I know," I replied, "but this didn't happen privately. It shouldn't be resolved privately either." Another pause, when he asked, "As soon as possible." By the next afternoon, everything was in motion. Word spread quickly. Ironically, just like the rumors had. A community meeting. About me. People were curious, skeptical, some already convinced they knew the outcome. When I walked into the hall that evening, I felt it immediately. The tension, the weight of eyes on me. Some avoided looking directly at me. Others didn't. They stared, judging, questioning, waiting. I took a deep breath and kept walking. Because this time, I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to show them the truth. Pastor Williams stood at the front, his posture stiff, his expression serious. Linda sat in the second row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. And then I saw her. Melissa, sitting beside Daniel, calm, collected, as if this were just another event she expected to control. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw it. Confidence. Not as strong as before, but still there. She still believed she could walk away from this. That belief was about to break. The room quieted as Pastor William stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We're here to address concerns that have affected our community and one of its most valued members." He glanced at me briefly, then continued. "Brandon Emerson has requested the opportunity to speak." A murmur moved through the crowd. I stepped forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. But I didn't stop. I stood at the front facing the people I had known for years. The people who had turned away. The people who had believed something I never did. I didn't start with denial. I didn't start with anger. I started with honesty. For over 40 years, I said my voice steady. I have given everything I could to this community. Silence. I never asked for recognition. I continued. But I accepted your trust, and I valued it more than anything. I let that sit, then, and when I lost it, I didn't understand why. A few heads lowered, just slightly. "I heard the rumors," I said. "I saw the posts, the accusations, and for a while, I thought maybe if I just explained myself, things would go back to normal." I paused, but they didn't. Now the room was completely still. "Because this wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It was something else." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "And I'm not here to ask you to believe me," I said. "I'm here to show you." I pressed play. At first, people didn't react. They listened, carefully, trying to understand what they were hearing. Then, recognition. Melissa's voice, clear, unmistakable. "It's working. People are already starting to question her." A ripple moved through the room. Once the document circulates, someone gasped. "She won't know how the silence that followed was different. Heavier, because now they weren't guessing anymore. They were hearing it. From her." I stopped the recording and looked up. Faces had changed. Confusion, shock, realization. Linda's hand covered her mouth. Pastor William stared at the floor. And Daniel, he didn't look at anyone. He just sat there, still. Melissa, however, hadn't moved, but the confidence was gone. "What you heard," I said quietly, "is the truth." No one spoke. "Those documents you saw," I continued, "were fabricated. Those rumors were planted." I let my eyes move across the room. "And many of you believed them." That part hurt, but it needed to be said. Not to accuse, but to acknowledge. "I don't blame you," I added softly, "because you were given something that looked real." A pause, but now you know it wasn't. The room stayed silent, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was filled with something else, understanding and regret. Melissa stood up suddenly. "This proves nothing," she said sharply. All eyes turned to her. "That recording could be taken out of context." She continued, "You don't know the full story." I looked at her calmly. "Then tell it," I said. She froze, because for the first time, she didn't have control of the narrative, and everyone could see it. The truth wasn't hidden anymore. It was right there, in front of all of them, and there was no going back. For a few seconds after Melissa spoke, no one reacted, not because they agreed with her, but because they were trying to understand how someone could stand there after everything that had just been revealed and still pretend there was another version of the truth. I didn't interrupt her. I let the silence stretch. Because silence forces people to think. And this time, they were. "You don't know the full story," Melissa repeated, her voice sharper now, almost defensive. I tilted my head slightly. Then tell it, I said again. This time, the words landed differently, not as an invitation, but as a challenge. She hesitated, and that hesitation was louder than anything she had said. The room noticed it too. I could see it in their faces. That shift. That moment where doubt moves from one person to another. From me to her. Pastor William stepped forward slightly. Melissa, he said carefully, if there is more to explain, this would be the time. She looked at him, then at the crowd. All eyes were on her now. Not curious, not sympathetic, expectant. And that was something she hadn't prepared for, because she had always controlled the narrative. But now, she had to respond to it. I don't owe anyone an explanation, she said finally. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Not anger, disappointment. Because that answer said everything. I stepped forward. You're right, I said calmly. You don't owe anyone anything. She looked at me surprised by my tone. But they don't owe you belief either, I continued. That landed. I turned slowly, facing the room again. I stood here today knowing some of you doubted me, I said. Some of you believed things about me that were never true. A few people lowered their heads. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I added. I'm here because I know how easy it is to believe something that sounds convincing. I paused. But what matters is what you do when you realize it's not true. The room was completely still now. Not tense, not hostile, just listening. Linda stood up slowly. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Brandon, she said, I should have trusted you. I looked at her. For a moment, all the years between us felt present again. The friendship, the memories, the trust that had been broken not by her actions alone, but by what she chose to believe. I wish you had, I said gently. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I'm sorry. Those 2 words, they didn't fix everything, but they mattered. More than I expected. Because they were honest. Pastor William stepped forward next. I owe you an apology as well, he said. I should have come to you directly before allowing doubts to spread. More than I expected, because they were honest. Pastor William stepped forward next. I owe you an apology as well, he said. I should have come to you directly before allowing doubts to spread. I gave a small nod. Thank you, I replied. One by one, people began to speak, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. I didn't know what to think. I should have asked, sorry. Each apology added something back. Not all at once, not completely, but piece by piece. Something I thought was lost began to return. Trust. Not blind, not unquestioned, but real. Melissa stood there watching it happen, and for the first time, she wasn't the center of attention. She was the outsider, the one people looked at with confusion, with disappointment, with quiet judgment. Daniel finally stood up beside her. His voice was steady now, clear. This is over, he said again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It wasn't emotional. It was final. Melissa looked at him. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not regret, something closer to frustration. You're making a mistake, she said. Daniel shook his head. No, he replied. I already did. That line. It cut deeper than anything else he had said. Because it wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. And the choice he had made to doubt me. He turned to me. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said. I held his gaze. "I won't," I replied honestly. He nodded. "I understand." But there was something else in his eyes now. Not just regret, determination to make it right. And that mattered more than words. Melissa looked around the room one last time, at the people who no longer believed her, at the narrative she could no longer control, at the truth she couldn't undo. Then she picked up her bag. No dramatic exit, no final argument, just silence. And she walked out. The door closed behind her. And just like that, it was over. Not because she admitted defeat, but because the truth had already won. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer. Then Pastor William spoke. "I think we all have something to reflect on," he said. I didn't stay much longer. I didn't need to, because this wasn't about standing there and receiving apologies. It was about something deeper. Walking away with my name intact. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because the weight was gone. Daniel followed me out. "Mom," he said. I stopped, but I didn't turn right away. "I'm going to fix what I can," he continued. "Not just with you, but with everything she did." I turned then, and for the first time in days, I saw my son again. Not someone confused, not someone influenced, just him. "We'll see," I said. He nodded. That was enough. I walked to my car slowly, not rushing, not looking back, because for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't running from anything. I was moving forward, and behind me, the community I thought I had lost was already beginning to stand back up. For me. The days after the meeting were quiet. Not the kind of silence that feels empty. The kind that feels like something is rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without that tightness in my chest. No anxiety waiting for me the moment I opened my eyes. No dread about what people might be saying. Because now, they weren't guessing anymore. They knew. The phone calls started first. Not all at once, one by one. Linda called again the next morning. Not to apologize this time, just to talk. "I made coffee," she said softly. "If you feel like stopping by." There was something gentle in her voice. Not pressure, not expectation, just an open door. "I'll come by later," I said. And I did. We sat at her kitchen table just like we had done dozens of times over the years. But this time, there was a quiet understanding between us. No pretending, no avoiding what had happened. "I let doubt get in the way," she said. I nodded. "We all do." "Sometimes," I replied. She looked at me carefully. "You're handling this better than I expected." I gave a small smile. I don't think I had a choice, but that wasn't entirely true. I did have a choice. I could have held on to anger. I could have demanded more. I could have made people feel worse for what they had done. But that wouldn't rebuild anything. That would only break more. And I was tired of things breaking. Later that week, Pastor William asked me to return to the church. Not for a meeting, for something else. I think people need to hear from you again, he said. This time I didn't hesitate. When I stood in front of that room again, it felt different. Not because people saw me differently, but because I saw them differently. More human, more flawed, but also more willing to change. I don't want to talk about what happened, I told them. A few people looked surprised. I want to talk about what comes next. The room quieted. Because this wasn't just about me, I continued. It was about all of us. I paused, letting the words settle. We live in a time where it's easy to believe something without questioning it, easy to judge without asking, easy to distance ourselves from people we've trusted based on something we haven't even verified. I looked around the room. And that doesn't make you bad people, I said. It makes you human. Some of them nodded slowly. But what defines us, I added, is what we do when we realize we were wrong. Silence. Not heavy, not tense, just reflective. I forgive you, I said simply. That word, forgive. It wasn't easy. It wasn't automatic. But it was necessary. Because holding on to what happened would only keep me tied to it, and I was ready to move forward. After the gathering, people didn't rush up to me. They approached slowly, respectfully, not trying to fix everything at once, just reconnecting. And that mattered, more than apologies, more than explanations, because trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with time. Daniel came by that evening. He didn't call ahead, he just showed up. Standing at the door, looking uncertain, like he didn't know if he still belonged there. I opened it anyway. Come in, I said. He stepped inside slowly, looking around like everything felt unfamiliar. I've been talking to people, he said, trying to undo what I can. I nodded. I know. He looked surprised. You do. People talk? I said gently. He gave a small, almost relieved smile. I should have done that from the beginning, he said. I didn't argue, because he was right. We sat down in the living room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I don't expect things to go back to how they were. They won't, I replied honestly. He nodded. But I want to try, he added. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Growth, painful, uncomfortable, but real. Then we'll try, I said. That was enough. Not a promise, not a resolution, just a beginning. As for Melissa, she left town within the week. No explanations, no apologies, just gone. Some people asked me how I felt about that, if I wanted closure, if I wanted justice. But the truth was, I already had it. Not the kind that comes from punishment, the kind that comes from truth being seen, from lies losing their power, from everything she tried to take being given back, and more, because something unexpected had happened. The community didn't just return to how it was before. It became stronger, more careful, more thoughtful. People asked questions now. They listened more closely. They trusted, but not blindly. And in a strange way, what happened didn't just restore my reputation. It rebuilt something bigger for all of us. One evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun set over the same street I had walked for decades. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. Lighter, clearer, stronger. Because I had learned something through all of this. Reputation isn't what people say about you when things are easy. It's what survives when everything is tested. And mine had survived. Not because I fought harder, but because the truth didn't need to be forced. It just needed to be revealed. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle around me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. After everything Brandon Emerson went through, one truth becomes clear. Trust is fragile, but it is not impossible to rebuild. People can be misled, manipulated, and even turned against those they once believed in. But when truth is revealed, not through anger, but through clarity, it has a way of restoring what was broken. This story reminds us that reputation is not defined by rumors, accusations, or even temporary doubt. It is defined by consistency, integrity, and the strength to stand firm when everything seems to fall apart. Brandon didn't win by attacking others. She won by staying grounded in truth and allowing it to speak for itself. There is also a powerful lesson about perception. We often believe what we see first, especially when it is presented convincingly. But this story challenges us to pause, to question, and to seek understanding before forming judgment. Because sometimes the loudest story is not the truest one. And finally, forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. It is about choosing not to let it define your future. Brandon chose to move forward not because people didn't hurt her, but because she refused to carry that hurt forever. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been misunderstood or judged unfairly? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories like this. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now?